The Rhineland village square lay beneath a shroud of ash that April morning in 1945, its cobblestones scattered with the debris of ordinary life now shattered, fragments of a bakery's window, pieces of a schoolroom's door, remnants of peaceful Sundays that would never return. Smoke rose from roofless buildings like prayers offered to an indifferent sky. Lieutenant James Avery moved carefully through the wreckage, his Lee Enfield rifle across his back, each step grinding glass into smaller pieces. Then he saw her, a woman bound to a wooden post at the square's center. Her nurse's uniform hung torn and stained, mud and blood marking the fabric. Above her head, someone had nailed a crudely painted sign, Verräterin, Traitor. The crowd surrounding her numbered perhaps 30 villagers, hollow-faced women, threadbare old men, even a child absently kicking stones. Someone spat, the sound echoing wetly against the cobblestones. Avery felt the moment's gravity before fully understanding it. He carried a rifle and wore the uniform that marked him as both liberator and outsider. The woman's head hung low, but her chest still rose and fell. Perhaps a minute remained before someone in that gathering decided waiting had become unbearable. His section had been assigned to secure the eastern checkpoint. Clear roads, mark mines, let the village handle its own affairs. But a woman's cry had pulled him here, sharp and sudden, before being silenced. Avery signaled Corporal Dawes to hold position with safeties engaged. He entered the square alone. The crowd turned as one. An elderly man in a stained Homburg stepped forward, gesturing at the bound woman as though she were evidence itself. "She helped your men," he declared in German. "She gave them water while our boys bled. She is a traitor." Avery's pulse hammered. He had stood in burning buildings with more composure. This was different. A village attempting to cauterize its shame by burning the wound itself. The woman's wrist showed raw flesh where rope bit deep. Her face bore bruises in shades of violet and gray. When her eyes lifted to meet his, they held no plea, only exhaustion and the resignation of someone who had stopped expecting mercy. What followed would test the thinnest line in warfare. The boundary between justice and murder, between orders and conscience, between the person one was raised to be and the person war demanded one become. Avery planted his rifle butt, first against the cobblestones like a stake claiming ground. "Halt!" He commanded in clipped German. The crowd hesitated, their momentum interrupted. They had been a river flowing toward violence. Now they pooled uncertainly. The old man recovered first, his voice climbing with rehearsed indignation. "This does not concern you, Herr Offizier. This is German justice. Our village, our traitor, your village is now British jurisdiction." Avery replied, placing each German word deliberately. "And I see no justice here, only a rope and a crowd." A younger man pushed forward, mid-30s, gaunt, one sleeve pinned empty where an arm should have been, a veteran carrying war in his bones and rage in his marrow. "She gave water to your men while my brother died 3 streets away, choking on his own blood. She washed British wounds, bandaged British hands. She chose them over us." Avery let silence settle before asking, "What is her name?" The question landed like a wrench thrown into machinery. "What?" The one armed man blinked. "Her name," Avery repeated slowly. "If you are executing her for treason, you must know her name, her rank, her unit, the specific charges. Show me the court-martial documentation. Show me the Feldgendarmerie order. Show me anything that says this is law and not a lynching." The old man sputtered. "We do not need papers to know betrayal." "Then you do not have justice." Avery's voice hardened. "You have revenge. And revenge is not yours to take, not anymore." A woman's voice rose from the back, raw with grief. "She let them live. The soldiers who bombed our children, who burned our homes. She saved them." Avery turned toward the voice. "Did she pull the triggers? Did she load the bombers? Did she give the orders? She gave them mercy while we had none. Then she was a nurse." Avery said simply, doing what nurses do. "Verräterin!" someone shouted. "Traitor!" The word became a chant, half-hearted but gaining heat. The mob was trying to remember why it had gathered, trying to reconvince itself of its righteousness. Avery identified the true ringleader, not the old man or the veteran, but a younger man standing 3 rows back. He wore an expensive coat, despite the surrounding ruin. Clean-shaven, eyes cold and calculating, the kind who never threw stones himself but knew exactly when to point at the target. Her officier, the ringleader, said smoothly, stepping forward with practiced ease. Why understand your position, but you must understand ours. This woman defied orders. She stayed when told to evacuate. She aided enemy combatants. These are facts. The sentence has been decided. Decided by whom? Avery asked, meeting his gaze directly. By the people she betrayed. Then the people have no authority. Avery's words dropped like a gavel. I do. The ringleader smiled thinly. You are one man, her lieutenant, with a section of tired soldiers in a village that does not want you here. You cannot police every corner, every street, every moment. We will reclaim what is ours. It was a threat wrapped in courtesy, a calculation presented as fact. Avery felt Corporal Dawes shift at the square's edge, saw his section's subtle repositioning, trained men reading the temperature drop. He took one step forward, then another, close enough now that the ringleader could see the mud on his uniform, the sleepless days in his eyes, the war that had aged him beyond his 26 years. You are correct, Avery said quietly in English, letting its foreignness assert itself, then switching back to German. I am one man, but I am the man with the rifle and the authority of His Majesty's armed forces. And if you touch her again, you will learn exactly how much one man can do when he decides the law matters more than the mob. The ringleader's smile faltered. Avery pivoted, addressing the crowd. This woman is under British protective custody. Any attempt to harm her will be considered an act of aggression against Allied forces and will be met accordingly. If you have charges, submit them in writing to military government. If you have evidence, present it to a proper tribunal. Until then, she is not yours. The old man tried once more, voice shaking. But I know what she did. Avery interrupted, though he didn't. Not yet. And I know what you want to do, but wanting is not the same as being right. And being angry is not the same as being just. He turned to the post. The woman's eyes tracked him, exhausted and waiting for the next cruelty. Fraulein, he said, voice low enough that only she heard. I am Lieutenant Avery, British Army. I'm going to cut the rope now. Do you understand? She nodded barely, a movement small as prayer. Avery drew his knife. The blade caught gray light, reflected nothing back. The rope was cheap hemp, frayed at edges, tied with knots learned for tethering animals. It parted under pressure, fell away like a spell, breaking. The woman collapsed forward. Avery caught his arm around her shoulders, steadying her weight against his chest. She weighed almost nothing. War had rationed even the substance of bodies. Ist vorbei, he murmured. It's over. Her breath shuddered against his uniform. Behind him, the crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, like smoke losing its shape. The ringleader melted back into rubble. The old man spat once more and turned away. The mother with the rag voice covered her face and wept. Corporal Dawes appeared at Avery's elbow. Sir, ambulance is 2 minutes out. Good. Avery shifted his grip, lifted the woman fully, cradled her like something breakable, which they all were. As he carried her across the square toward his waiting section, he felt it, the cost of choosing. His hands were steady. His orders had been clear, but something inside him had shifted, a weight redistributed in ways he couldn't yet name. The war had never been impersonal, but it had been distant, a thing of maps and objectives, movements and missions. Now it was a woman's pulse against his forearm, a village's hatred in his wake. A choice made not because it was ordered, but because it was necessary. He had crossed a line he could not uncross. The field hospital tent smelled of canvas, iodine, and the particular staleness of air cycled through too many lungs. Avery sat on an overturned crate beside the cot, watching the woman sleep. She had been unconscious for 4 hours. The medic, a Scotsman named McLeod with watchmaker's hands, had cataloged her injuries with clinical precision: 2 cracked ribs, severe dehydration, contusions mapping her back like failed geography lessons, rope burns encircling both wrists. She'll wake, McLeod had said. Body's just demanding the rest it's owed. As dusk bled through the tent canvas, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on nothing, then everything. She saw the IV line first, then the British field dressing on her shoulder, then Avery. She didn't flinch, just watched him with the careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. "Wesser," she whispered. "Water." Avery reached for the canteen McLeod had left, held it to her lips. She drank like someone who had forgotten the shape of mercy, small sips, hesitant, as if the water might be rescinded. "Thank you," she said in German, then switched to heavily accented English. "You are the officer from the square. Lieutenant Avery." He set the canteen down. "You're safe here, under British protection." She almost laughed. The sound caught in her throat, became a cough. "Safe?" "Yes. I have heard this word before. What's your name?" A pause, as if even this simple fact might be dangerous. "Liesa," she said finally. "Liesa Hartmann. I was a nurse. Kriegslazaret, Sector West. Rhineland Front." She paused. "Was, I think. I am not a nurse anymore, only a traitor." "Tell me what happened," Avery said. From the beginning, she told it slowly in fragments like someone assembling a broken mirror. The hospital had been a repurposed schoolhouse. 20 beds that became 40, then 60, then bodies on the floor because there was nowhere else to put them. 3 doctors, 8 nurses, dwindling supplies that turned medicine into mathematics. Who gets the morphine? Who gets the bandage? Who gets to die slower? February was when it started to collapse. The front didn't retreat. It dissolved. One day they had supply lines, the next they had rumors. German units mixed with stragglers, deserters, boys in uniforms 3 sizes too large, who looked at the nurses like they were ghosts. The order came in March. Liesa said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "Evacuate. Fall back. Leave the ones who cannot walk." Avery knew this order, had read the intelligence reports. The Wehrmacht in full collapse, discipline fraying, officers executing their own men for refusing suicidal stands. "We were supposed to leave them." Her eyes found his. 32 men, some German, some not. We had British prisoners, Americans, even a Russian, all bleeding the same, all needing hands that knew how to close wounds instead of opening them. She stayed. 3 nurses stayed. The doctors fled. "We boiled bandages in rainwater," she said. "Used snaps when the ether ran out. I held a boy's hand while he died. German boy, maybe 17. He called me mother. I was 23. The detail landed like shrapnel. She described the stink of infection, the sound of shattered morphine, vials swept into corners, the way gangrene smells like earth and rot together. She described amputations by candlelight, a British sergeant who sang hymns through his fever, a Luftwaffe pilot who sketched birds on the walls with charcoal from the stove. "Then your men came," she said. "A patrol. Lost looking for their unit. One was wounded. Shrapnel in his shoulder, bleeding badly. Red hair, freckles like a child." Avery listened, did not interrupt, let her build the testimony brick by brick. His name was Thomas. Tommy. He made jokes even while I dug metal from his flesh. Asked if I had a sister. She smiled faintly at the memory. I told him I had 3 brothers. "All dead now," he cried. Not from pain, from that. The British patrol stayed 2 days, long enough for Tommy's fever to break, long enough for the other wounded to see that the enemy wore the same exhaustion they did. "One of your soldiers, older man, corporal, he shared his chocolate, real chocolate. I had not tasted it in 2 years. He gave it to the German boys too. Said, 'War's done, lads. Might as well be human before we go back to killing each other.' When the patrol left, they offered to take her. She refused. Someone had to stay with the wounded, but someone saw, a villager, a Feldgendarmerie officer, or someone claiming to be one in a war where authority was whatever uniform you could scavenge. He called it treason, Liesa said, her voice hardening, aiding the enemy, consorting with occupiers, betraying the Reich. The real betrayal, Avery thought, was expecting her to choose nation over mercy. They came at night, dragged me from the hospital, the wounded, those who could still move. They tried to stop it. A boy with one leg stood between me and the soldiers. They beat him unconscious. She was tied to the post at dawn, the sign painted while she watched. They told me I would hang at sunset, as an example, so others would know the price of kindness. Her voice fractured on the last word. She turned her face away toward the tent wall where shadows flickered like ghosts of flames. Avery sat in the silence that followed. Outside, the camp settled into evening routine, mess tins clanging, voices trading cigarettes and rumors, the distant cough of an engine. He thought about the war they taught at Sandhurst, the clean one with clear enemies and clearer orders. Then he thought about the war he had lived, the one where a German nurse saving a British soldier became a capital crime. In the last months, he said quietly, speaking as much to himself as to her, we have seen things fall apart, not just armies, people. The rules we thought were iron turned out to be smoke. He had seen reprisal killings, civilians shot for hiding deserters, soldiers hanged for refusing to defend ruins. A world where mercy became heresy and survival demanded you choose between your humanity and your life. Liesa looked back at him. Her eyes were dry now. Exhaustion had burned through the tears. What happens to me now? She asked. You stay here, Avery said. Under protection. I'll make sure the record states you acted as a medical professional under impossible conditions. No charges, no trial, no more signs. And when I leave, it was the question he had been avoiding. Then you will have papers that say the British Army vouches for your character. It may not be enough, but it is what I can give. She nodded slowly, accepting this fragile promise. Thank you, Lieutenant Avery, she said, for the water, for the words, for standing in the square when you did not have to. I did have to, he replied. I just didn't know it until I saw the rope. British 2nd Army Headquarters, Temporary Command Post, Rhineland Sector. April 17, 1945. Major Clifton sat behind a field desk that had seen better wars. Maps curled at edges. A cigarette burned forgotten in a tin ashtray. He read Avery's incident report for the third time, lips pressed thin. Lieutenant? His voice was sand and gravel. Walk me through your decision tree. Avery stood at attention, cap under his arm, uniform still carrying yesterday's mud. Sir, I encountered a civilian detained without proper authority. I assessed the situation as extrajudicial punishment and intervened per Article 27 of the Geneva Convention regarding. I know the bloody convention, Avery. Clifton dropped the report. What I don't know is why you thought it was your job to play magistrate in a German village square. With respect, sir, I was preventing a murder. You were exceeding your authority. Clifton leaned back, chair groaning. Your orders were checkpoint security, not social work. Not playing savior to every sob story in a nurse's uniform, the words landed like a slap. Avery kept his face neutral, parade ground blank. She wasn't a sob story, sir. She was a prisoner about to be executed by a mob, a German prisoner in a German village dealing with German justice, or injustice, if you prefer. Not your problem. Silence filled the space between them, heavy as smoke. Clifton sighed, suddenly older. Listen, James, I understand the impulse. God knows I do. But we're not here to referee every score they want to settle. We're here to secure ground, establish order, and move east. The minute you start caring about every rope and post, you stop being a soldier and start being, what, sir? A liability. The words sat between them like unexploded ordnance. Permission to speak freely, sir. Clifton waved a hand. You're already waist deep. Might as well wade in. If we ignore civilians being murdered in our jurisdiction, we're not establishing order. We're sanctioning chaos. We become complicit in the very barbarism we're supposed to be ending. Careful, Lieutenant. That sounds dangerously close to philosophy. We don't pay you to philosophize. We pay you to follow orders. My orders. Avery said quietly, include upholding the laws of war, even when it's inconvenient. Clifton studied him for a long moment, then reached for his cigarette, found it cold, lit another. You know what your problem is, Avery. You still think war has rules. From Lieutenant James Avery's personal diary, April 17th, 1945, his mother would say, I'm making things complicated again. She always said, I thought too much. That thinking was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. Maybe she was right, but I keep seeing the rope, the sign, the woman's face when I cut her free, the way she folded like something held together by will alone. Clifton asked me why I intervened. I gave him the official answer, Geneva Convention, proper authority, legal duty. But the truth is simpler and more damning. I intervened because if I hadn't, I would have become the kind of man who walks past a lynching. I would have become the kind of man who lets convenience murder conscience. Is that philosophy? Or is that just being human? Avery wrote at a borrowed desk in the officer's mess, cup of tea gone cold beside him. Around him, the machinery of war continued, radio chatter, boots on duckboards, someone arguing about fuel allocations. He thought about his brother David, who died at Dunkirk, shot while covering a retreat that saved 30 men. Posthumous commendation. A medal sent to their mother in a box she never opened. David believed in duty above all, duty above doubt, above fear, above the small voice that asks why. Avery enlisted 3 months later, tried to fill the space his brother left, tried to be the kind of soldier David was, certain, unwavering, faithful to orders as if orders were gospel. But war teaches things training doesn't. It teaches that orders come from men, and men are fallible. It teaches that duty can be a suicide pact if you're not careful. It teaches that sometimes the most important thing you can do is say no. David never learned that. David died believing. Avery was still trying to figure out what he believed in. The chaos of post-liberation Europe sprawled beyond the command post like a fever dream. Villages policed themselves with rope and rumor. Civilians took revenge on collaborators, real and imagined. Women were shaved, beaten, paraded through streets. Men were shot in ditches for crimes as vague as working with them, or as specific as being seen. The Allies tried to impose order, but order was a fiction in a world where the rules had dissolved months ago. Military government issued proclamations. Villagers ignored them. Soldiers patrolled streets. The revenge happened at night. Avery had seen it in recent weeks. A French woman stoned for sleeping with a German, a Dutch mayor hanged for requisitioning food, a Belgian priest beaten for sheltering deserters. Justice as catharsis, punishment as purge. And the soldiers caught between, forced to decide, do you intervene? Do you let it happen? Do you draw the line? Or do you acknowledge the line is already ashes? Mercy is not mission, Clifton had said. But what is the mission if not to prevent the world from devouring itself? British Second Army HQ. Later that evening, Clifton found Avery smoking outside the mess tent, watching the sky darken over the shattered landscape. You're not in trouble, the major said without preamble. Officially, the report will note your actions as within acceptable discretion given fluid circumstances. You'll get no commendation, but no reprimand either. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. I'm still not sure you were right. Clifton lit his own cigarette, exhaled slowly, but I'm not sure you were wrong either. And that bothers me more than I care to admit. They stood in silence, two men watching the same war from different angles. Can I ask you something, sir? If I say no, will it stop you? Did you ever wonder if we're the traitors? Clifton turned, eyebrow raised. Explain. We swore oaths to fight barbarism, to defend civilization, to uphold certain principles. But how often do we ignore those principles because enforcing them is inconvenient? How often do we look away because looking costs too much? Every day, Clifton said quietly. Every single day. Then who are we loyal to, sir? Really, the major considered this. Ashes fell from his cigarette like snow. I think, he said finally, we're loyal to the idea that someday, when this is over, we might still recognize ourselves in the mirror. That's the best I can offer you, Lieutenant. The rest is just surviving until we get there. He ground out his cigarette, turned to leave, then paused. The nurse. Liesa. What happens to her? She stays under British protection. I've arranged transfer to a DP camp with proper documentation. After that, Avery shrugged. After that, she's a German woman in a Germany that may not forgive her for being kind. So you saved her for what? 6 months? A year? I saved her for 1 day, Avery said. The day she was about to die. That's all any of us can do. Clifton nodded slowly. Maybe that's enough? Maybe, Avery echoed. Or maybe it's just what we tell ourselves so we can sleep. The major walked away, boots crunching gravel. Avery finished his cigarette, watching embers fall like small surrenders. Above, stars emerged through the smoke, indifferent, eternal, watching a world that eats itself and calls it justice. Tomorrow he would return to duty, would clear roads, secure checkpoints, follow orders. But tonight he was a man who cut a rope and wondered if compassion is disobedience, or if obedience without compassion is the greater betrayal. April 23th, 1945, British DP Processing Center, Rhineland. The paperwork took longer than the rescue. Liesa Hartmann sat across from a clerk who typed with 2 fingers, hunting and pecking through her testimony: name, age, occupation, circumstances of detention, reason for British intervention. The clerk asked if she had family. She said no. He asked if she had a destination. She said no. He stamped 3 forms, filed them in a folder that joined hundreds of others in a canvas bag destined for an archive that might never be opened. Next, the clerk called. Liesa stood, holding a paper that said she was a displaced person under Allied protection. It did not say she was innocent. It did not say she was right. It said only that she existed, and that for now, that was enough. Avery watched from the doorway. She saw him, nodded once. Acknowledgement, not gratitude. Gratitude implies debt. What passed between them in that square was something else, something without a name in any language he knew. Where will you go? He asked. West, she said. Way from the ruins. Perhaps to family I hope still breathe. Perhaps to no one. It does not matter. I am alive, which means I must continue being alive. If you need anything, you have given what you could, Lieutenant. Her voice was gentle, final. The rest is mine to carry. She walked away, folding herself into the river of refugees that flowed west like water finding its level. Avery watched until she disappeared into the crowd. Another story the war would swallow and never fully digest. He wondered if he would remember her face in 10 years, 20, or if she would become just another moment in a war built of moments important when it happened, inevitable when it's over. Avery returned to the square before his unit moved out. Dawn light cut through the ruins, painting everything the color of old bone. The post still stood, though someone had tried to burn it. The wood was charred at the base, black tongue marks licking upward, but it had not fallen. It remained defiant or indifferent. It was hard to say. The sign lay face down in the mud where he had dropped it. Rain had softened the letters. Verräterin, the paint bleeding into the grain, the accusation dissolving into abstraction. Avery knelt, turned it over, stared at the word that had meant death, now just wood and weather. He thought about burning it, about smashing it, about carrying it back to headquarters as evidence of something, though evidence of what he could not name. Instead, he left it there, half buried, fading. Some things should be remembered. Some things should be forgotten. Most things exist in the terrible space between. In the final months of World War II, Europe dissolved into a chaos that history textbooks struggle to capture. The liberation was not clean. It was not simple. It was a reckoning that came in waves, each one exposing new layers of guilt, new categories of victim, new impossible questions about who deserved mercy and who deserved judgment. Between April and August 1945, Allied forces documented over 10,000 cases of reprisal killings across occupied Germany, civilians accused of collaboration, deserters executed by their own retreating armies, women punished for loving the wrong uniform. The numbers are estimates. Most deaths left no paperwork, no witness, no grave. Military hospitals and field stations became sanctuaries for those caught between vengeance and law. Nurses like Liesa Hartmann, German, French, Dutch, Italian, who treated wounded regardless of flag, found themselves branded traitors by communities desperate to assign blame for their suffering. The International Red Cross recorded 847 such cases in Germany alone. Most received no recognition. Some received punishment. A handful, like Liesa, received the one thing rarer than mercy in those days, a second chance. Lieutenant James Avery was one of thousands of Allied officers tasked with policing the collapse. They cleared mines, secured roads, and made impossible decisions about when to intervene in the rage of villages that had earned their rage honestly. Some looked away. Some drew lines. All of them carried the weight of choices made in moments too fast for certainty, too important for doubt. The post-war trials, Nuremberg and beyond, would establish frameworks for justice. But before the frameworks, there were only men and women standing in ruined squares, asking themselves what humanity meant when the world had forgotten. Avery wrote to his mother from a requisitioned house in what used to be a German officer's quarters. The furniture was gone, looted or burned. Only the wallpaper remained, floral patterns faded by sun and smoke. Dear mother, I cannot tell you much about where I am or what I do. The censors would cut my words to confetti. But I can tell you this, the war you read about in newspapers is not the war we live. The war you read about has clear sides. The one we live has only shades of gray, each one darker than the last. I think of David often, wonder what he would have done in my place. He always knew the right answer, or seemed to. He had a certainty I envy and distrust in equal measure. I am learning that certainty is a luxury, perhaps the only luxury war truly denies us. I will come home different than I left. I do not know if this is forgiveness I ask or warning I give. Perhaps both. Your son, James Liesa Hartmann, survived the war, worked in a British hospital for displaced persons, immigrated to Canada in 1947, married a teacher, raised two children who never quite understood why their mother flinched at raised voices, why she kept bandages in every room, why she volunteered at hospitals until arthritis took her hands. She died in 1983. Her obituary mentioned nothing of the post, the rope, or the sign. It mentioned only that she was kind. James Avery remained in the army until 1948, rose to captain, declined to stay for a career, opened a bookshop in Kent where he sold secondhand histories and drank tea with customers who wanted to talk about anything except the war. He never wrote about the square, never spoke of it except once, to a nephew studying philosophy who asked what he learned in the war. That loyalty, Avery said slowly, is not to flags or orders or even countries. Loyalty, in the end, is to the human being standing in front of you. Everything else is just noise we make to justify looking away. The nephew didn't understand. Not then. But he would. The sign said traitor. But the greater betrayal would have been to walk away. In a world fracturing into sides, into us and them, into who deserves mercy and who deserves rope, the most radical act is the simplest. To see a person and refuse to unsee them. To stand in the space between cruelty and crowd and say, not this. Not today, not while I'm breathing. Avery and Liesa were not heroes. They were people who, for one moment, chose differently, chose life when death was easier, chose mercy when vengeance was expected, chose humanity when the world demanded they choose sides. The war taught a million lessons, tactics and strategy, logistics and loss. But the only lesson that matters is this: when the rope is ready and the crowd is certain and the sign proclaims guilt without trial, someone must cut the rope. Someone must question the sign. Someone must remember that the person tied to the post is still a person. That is not heroism. That is not philosophy. That is loyalty to the only thing worth being loyal to. the idea that being human means more than surviving. It means choosing in the moments that matter to see each other clearly, and then to act as if that seeing demands something of us. Because it does.